hours on Monday, duffel bag slung over my shoulder, expecting nothing more than an intensive week of SEAL training exercises. My orders had been simple: report to Hangar E for specialized underwater extraction drills. Before I could even check in at the security desk, a woman in a dark suit intercepted me. "Commander Kovac, you're needed in the Artemis building. Director Voss is waiting." I followed her through a series of security checkpoints, each more restrictive than the last. My clearance level was considerable after 15 years of SEAL operations and 4 years of astronaut training, but I hadn't seen some of these protocols before. The final door required both retinal scanning and a code I wasn't permitted to see. The office beyond was sparse: gray walls, minimal furniture, and a single window overlooking the launch pads. Behind the desk sat Director Voss. Nothing moved on his face except his mouth when he spoke. "Sit down, Commander. We have limited time." I placed my bag on the floor and took the offered chair. "You're wondering why you've been diverted from your training schedule," Voss said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I represent SORID, Special Orbital Research and Intelligence Division." I kept my expression neutral despite my surprise. I'd never met anyone who openly claimed affiliation with SORID. "We have a situation requiring your specific skill set," Voss continued, sliding a tablet across the desk. "Helios Orbital, a research station that's been in low Earth orbit for 5 years. The screen displayed a cylindrical structure with extended solar arrays and several specialized modules, clearly designed for long-term habitation and research. But unlike any station configuration I'd seen in NASA briefings, Helios went dark 36 hours ago following what appears to be a significant radiation burst. We've lost all communication with the crew of 12 scientists and support personnel." I scrolled through the schematics. I wasn't aware we had another station besides ISS. Very few people are. That's the point. Voss almost smiled. "You've been selected for this mission because of your unique combination of qualifications. Your SEAL experience with high-pressure environments, plus your astronaut training. What's the mission objective, sir?" "Ascertain the status of the crew and, if possible, evacuate survivors. If evacuation isn't viable, retrieve the research data from the primary servers. You'll need to complete this within 24 hours of arrival." The timeline seemed unnecessarily tight. I'd been involved in enough rescue operations to know that rushing increased risks. Why the compressed time frame? Voss glanced at his watch as if already counting down. "Helios's orbit is highly elliptical. In approximately 72 hours, it will reach apogee at a distance that would make retrieval significantly more difficult and costly. We have a launch window tomorrow at 0500. "Tomorrow?" I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. "What about pre-mission prep? Equipment checks? Mission-specific training?" "Already arranged. You'll spend today in abbreviated but comprehensive briefings. The capsule is being prepared as we speak." He stood, indicating the meeting was concluding. "You're the right man for this, Commander. Your country needs you to succeed." I nodded. Innocent lives were potentially at risk on Helios. "I'll need complete information about what I'm walking into," I said. "Of course, within security parameters." Those last 3 words concerned me. The rest of the day blurred into a series of technical briefings. I studied the Helios layout, life support systems, and docking procedures. The capsule I'd be piloting was a modified Dragon design, capable of automated docking but requiring manual override capabilities given the station's compromised status. During a break between briefings, I noticed 2 technicians huddled over monitoring equipment, speaking in hushed tones. "Those readings can't be right," one said. "Nothing natural produces that pattern." "Matches what we saw before they went dark," the other replied. "Whatever's happening up there, it's getting stronger." When they noticed me, they immediately fell silent and returned to their work. Later, in the final briefing with Voss, I pushed for more information. "Sir, I've heard mentions of unusual readings from the station before communications failed. What exactly was Helios researching?" Voss's expression hardened. "The scientific objectives are classified beyond your current need to know, Commander. Focus on the rescue elements and data retrieval protocols we've covered. With respect, sir, knowing what research they were conducting could provide crucial context for what went wrong. The mission parameters have been clearly defined. His tone left no room for discussion. You have everything you need to succeed. By 2100 hours, I was finally alone in the temporary quarters assigned to me. The sparse room contained just a bed, desk, and private bathroom. I spread the mission materials across the desk and began my own review, looking for details that might have been glossed over in the official briefings. The station specifications seemed straightforward enough, but I noted curious omissions in the crew manifest. While their names and basic qualifications were listed, their specific research roles were redacted. Dr. Gabriel Reyna was identified as lead scientist, but his specialty areas were blacked out. Same for Dr. Samira Singh and the others. The station's power consumption logs showed significant spikes in the weeks before communications failure, far more energy than life support and standard research equipment would require. I took out my personal phone, which I'd been surprised they hadn't confiscated, and messaged an old NASA colleague, Marcus Jennings. We'd gone through astronaut training together before my career took a different path. Heard anything about a station called Helios Orbital? His response came 10 minutes later. Where did you hear that name? Be careful, Thad. Don't go near it if you have a choice. No choice. Launching tomorrow. What can you tell me? Minutes passed. Finally, nothing official. Rumors only. Something about experimental physics, radiation containment failures. Be very careful. Some things should be left alone. I tried calling him directly, but the call wouldn't connect. Either poor reception or, more likely, some kind of interference. As I prepared for bed, knowing I needed whatever rest I could get before the early launch, the small television in my room caught my attention. A news anchor was discussing what they termed unusual astronomical phenomena observed by amateur astronomers. Scientists are puzzled by what appears to be unprecedented stellar behavior in a localized area of near-Earth orbit, the reporter said, as grainy telescope images showed strange light patterns against the black of space. NASA officials have declined to comment on these observations, which began approximately 48 hours ago. The coordinates they mentioned placed these phenomena precisely in Helios Orbital's flight path. I switched off the television and lay in the darkness. Whatever waited for me aboard that station, Director Voss wasn't telling me everything I needed to know. But in less than 8 hours, I'd be launching toward it anyway. I barely slept that night. Voss's evasiveness and my colleague's cryptic warning kept my mind racing until my 0300 wake-up call. By 0430, I stood on the launch pad staring up at what they called the Artemis X, a sleek prototype shuttle that looked nothing like the bulky capsules NASA typically used. Impressive, isn't she? A technician approached, clipboard in hand. Specialized ion propulsion system. Cuts the journey from 2 days to 6 hours. I nodded, processing this new information, another detail Voss had conveniently omitted from yesterday's briefings. The accelerated timeline made tactical sense, if the situation aboard Helios was as dire as suggested, but also meant less time to mentally prepare for whatever awaited me. After a rushed pre-flight check and minimal ceremony, I found myself strapped into the pilot's seat. The cockpit was surprisingly spacious for a solo mission craft, with advanced navigation systems I recognized from classified briefings but had never operated. The automated launch sequence counted down, and the G-forces pressed me back as we pierced through the atmosphere. Once in stable orbit, I activated the ion drive. The acceleration was smooth, nothing like the conventional chemical propulsion I'd trained with. The Earth shrank rapidly behind me as I settled in for the 6-hour journey. I pulled up the station schematics on the main console, studying the layout I'd memorized yesterday. Something about seeing the rotating 3D model against the actual backdrop of space made the reality of my mission sink in. 12 lives, potentially at stake. Whatever had caused the station to go dark needed to be identified and, if possible, contained. The crew files contained more information than I'd been given during yesterday's briefings. Dr. Gabriel Reyna's file showed an impressive history, PhD in particle physics from MIT, followed by a decade at CERN before being recruited for this classified project. The other 11 scientists represented fields ranging from quantum mechanics to xenobiology, an unusual combination for what Voss had described as a standard research station. 5 hours into the flight, I caught my first glimpse of Helios Orbital. The massive cylindrical structure gradually took shape against the star field, its solar arrays extended outward. Most of the external lights were dark. Only the faint red glow of emergency systems provided visual confirmation that the station wasn't completely dead. Helios Orbital, this is Commander Kovac aboard Artemis X requesting docking clearance, I transmitted, following protocol despite the expected silence. No response came through my comms. I repeated the hail twice more before switching to manual approach mode. The station's automated docking guidance systems showed minimal activity, but enough to establish a basic connection. I carefully aligned my approach vector, compensating for the station's subtle rotational drift that shouldn't have been present in a fully operational facility. The docking clamps engaged with a solid thunk that resonated through my shuttle. Environmental systems confirmed a stable seal, and external cameras showed a secure connection to the station's main airlock. I performed a final equipment check, securing my sidearm and ensuring my specialized toolkit was complete. The mission clock showed I had approximately 18 hours remaining before the station would reach apogee, necessitating my departure. I cycled through the airlock, the pressure equalizing with a hiss. As the inner door slid open, I was met with darkness. The emergency lighting filled the corridor with a dim red glow. The temperature readout on my suit indicated 58 degrees, well below standard station operating parameters. The silence struck me immediately. Space stations were never truly quiet. The constant hum of life support systems, air circulation, and equipment created background noise that astronauts quickly got used to. Here, the sounds were muted, mechanical, with none of the human elements that should have been there. Helios Orbital, Commander Kovac reporting. Is anyone receiving? My voice echoed down the empty corridor. No answer came. I activated my helmet-mounted light and began moving forward, following the main corridor toward the central hub. 20 feet in, I encountered the first signs of the crew. A coffee mug sat on a small workstation, the dark liquid inside frozen into a solid mass. Next to it, a tablet remained powered on, its battery somehow still functioning. The screen displayed half-completed research notes, the final entry cutting off mid-sentence. Radiation levels in Specimen A have increased by 340% since exposure to... Further along, 2 chairs were positioned at a small table, a chess game in progress. The White Queen was positioned for checkmate in 2 moves, but the game had never been finished. I checked the timestamp on a nearby monitor, 36 hours ago, aligning with when the station had gone dark. The air recycling systems continued functioning at minimal capacity. Each breath carried a distinct metallic taste, similar to what astronauts described after spacewalks, but with an underlying chemical edge I couldn't identify. My training had covered various emergency atmospheric contaminants, but this scent matched none of them. I reached the command center, a circular room with workstations arranged in a hub and spoke pattern. The main systems hummed with backup power, status lights blinking lethargically across control panels. The primary view screen showed the Earth below, beautiful and oblivious to whatever had transpired here. I accessed the central computer, my fingers moving quickly across the interface. Life support was functioning at 42% capacity, enough to maintain survivable conditions but far below optimal levels. Internal communications were offline. External communication arrays showed physical damage that couldn't be diagnosed from this terminal. Computer, access security footage for the past 7 days, I commanded. Security archives for requested time period have been deleted. Authorization, Reyna, Gabriel, Chief Scientist. The computer's feminine voice sounded jarringly normal in the abandoned space. The deliberate deletion raised immediate red flags. Whatever had happened here, someone had made the specific decision to erase its documentation. I continued my exploration, moving methodically through the station. The crew quarters revealed more abandoned personal items, family photos, books marked with dog ears, a birthday card signed by multiple crew members. No signs of struggle or panic, just absence. Near the ventilation shaft in the third crew cabin, something caught my light. Crystalline formations, delicate and somehow geometric, grew from the edge of the vent cover. The structures resembled frost patterns but maintained their shape despite the relatively warm air flowing from the vent. I carefully extracted my multi-tool scanner from my equipment belt and took readings. The device beeped insistently, indicating radiation signatures it couldn't properly classify. The levels weren't immediately dangerous, but the pattern defied standard radiation behavior. According to the scanner, the highest concentration originated from the research wing, exactly where I'd need to go for the secondary objective of retrieving the station's data. The mess hall presented the most visceral evidence of sudden abandonment. 8 places were set at the 2 tables, with partially consumed meals now covered in mold. A sandwich had shriveled to half its original size. A bowl of what might have been soup had evaporated to a crusty residue. But on one plate at the far end, something caught my attention. A viscous, purplish substance remained, neither decayed nor dried out. As I directed my flashlight beam over it, the material seemed to respond, pulsing subtly with a rhythm that reminded me of a heartbeat. I leaned closer, carefully maintaining a safe distance. The substance didn't match any food I recognized. Its consistency resembled thick syrup, but with an iridescent quality that scattered my light in unexpected patterns. Most disturbing was its apparent reaction to my presence. The pulsing increased as I moved my hand near it without any physical contact. I carefully documented the substance with my scanner before backing away. Whatever this was, it clearly related to the station's research. Research no one had bothered to fully brief me on. If this mission was truly about rescue, why withhold such critical information? With the main living areas explored and no sign of the crew, I knew I needed to push deeper into the station. The research wing awaited, with its escalating radiation signatures and whatever secrets Dr. Reyna and his team had been investigating. Somewhere in that direction lay answers about the 12 missing scientists, and possibly the true reason I'd been sent here. The research wing door resisted my push, requiring a forceful shoulder to break the vacuum seal that had formed. It gave way with a harsh hiss of equalizing pressure. The air that rushed out carried that same metallic scent, but stronger here, almost coppery like blood, but with an underlying chemical sharpness I'd never encountered. I swept my helmet light across the corridor ahead. Unlike the rest of the station, the emergency lighting here had failed completely. My beam caught more of those crystalline formations, no longer confined to ventilation shafts. They spread across walls and ceiling in geometric patterns that seemed almost purposeful. My radiation scanner beeped more insistently, the readings climbing steadily as I advanced. The primary lab lay at the end of the corridor. Its reinforced door stood partially open, a sliver of blue-tinged light spilling through the gap. I approached cautiously, weapon drawn, ears straining for any sound beyond my own breathing and footsteps. "Hello, this is Commander Kovac. Is anyone there?" My voice echoed down the empty corridor. A noise responded from within the lab, something between a cough and a wet gurgle. Then came words, halting and strained. "Commander, expected you sooner." I pushed the door open fully, my light illuminating the lab beyond. Workstations lined the walls, screens still active with scrolling data. At the center stood what appeared to be a containment chamber, a hexagonal glass enclosure now shattered, its contents absent. A figure sat hunched at the primary workstation, back toward me. Even from behind, I could tell something was wrong with its proportions. The shoulders seemed too narrow, the neck too long. "Dr. Reyna." I kept my weapon ready, The figure turned, and I fought to control my expression. Dr. Gabriel Reyna's ID photo had shown a middle-aged man with olive skin and intelligent eyes. The being before me looked nothing like that. His face had grown gaunt, skin stretched tight over reconfigured bones. That skin now held a purplish hue, not the bluish pallor of oxygen deprivation, but something deeper, more fundamental. His limbs had elongated, fingers now unnaturally thin and jointed. A dirty bandage covered his left ear, seeping with crimson fluid that trailed down his neck. "You made it through the storm." Reyna's speech pattern was disjointed, words pushed out between labored breaths. Then suddenly clarity. "Sordid sent you to recover their investment, I assume?" The abrupt shift in his demeanor startled me. One moment struggling to form basic sentences, the next speaking with precise diction. "I'm here to rescue any survivors and retrieve the station's research data," I answered, maintaining my distance. "What happened here, Dr. Reyna? Where's the rest of your crew?" Reyna's mouth stretched in what might have been an attempt at a smile. "Survivors? Yes, though not as... you understand the term." His head tilted at an impossible angle. "Must show you recordings. Understand? Before judgment." He turned to the console, fingers moving with unnatural speed across the interface. The main view screen activated, showing security footage time-stamped 3 days earlier. "Watch. Learn." Reyna's voice slipped back into that unsettling clarity. The footage showed this same lab, fully staffed and brilliantly lit. In the center containment chamber sat what appeared to be a crystalline object, roughly the size of a basketball. Its structure caught the light in ways that defied normal refraction, creating patterns that seemed to move independently of the object itself. Dr. Reyna, still fully human, stood before a group of colleagues, gesturing animatedly. "The isotope dating confirms our initial hypothesis," Recorded Reyna explained. "This meteorite originated from the outer Kuiper belt, but its composition suggests it may have traveled much further before settling there. The crystalline structure contains microscopic chambers that we believe once housed primitive extraterrestrial microorganisms." The camera angle moved to show a woman I recognized from the crew manifest as Dr. Samira Singh. She adjusted her glasses and leaned toward the crystal. "If these chambers preserved microbial specimens from beyond our solar system, it would represent the first conclusive evidence of extraterrestrial life," Singh said. "But the radiation signatures are unlike anything we've cataloged before. I recommend additional containment protocols before further examination." The recording jumped forward several hours. Warning lights flashed across the lab as the scientists moved with urgent purpose. "Radiation storm approaching," an automated voice announced. "Secure all experimental materials." The crystal in the containment chamber began to glow, pulsing in rhythm with the radiation warnings. Then, with a sound that somehow carried through the recording despite vacuum-sealed containment, the crystal fractured. A fine mist of particles dispersed within the chamber. "Containment breach in progress," the system warned. But the scientists weren't evacuating. They were gathering closer, transfixed by what the sensors were telling them. "They're alive," Recorded Reyna whispered, his face pressed against the glass. The microorganisms survived millions of years in suspended animation. This changes everything we understand about the resilience of life. The footage jumped again, timestamp showing 12 hours later. Dr. Singh stood alone in a secondary lab, her expression grave as she studied microscope images. "Log entry, 42B," she dictated. "The entities released from the crystal are not microorganisms as we initially believed. Their structure suggests components of a complex parasitic organism capable of disassembling and reconstructing itself. More disturbing, they appear designed to interface with and rewrite DNA of host organisms. The pattern matching suggests deliberate engineering rather than evolutionary adaptation." She leaned back, removing her glasses. "I'm recommending immediate quarantine protocols and..." She stopped, staring at something off camera. Dr. Reyna, you should be in isolation. The exposure protocols were clear. The camera angle didn't show Reyna's approach, only Singh's growing horror as she backed away. Your ear... What's happening to your ear? The footage cut to security camera views of corridors and common areas. The crew running, sealing doors, attempted communications with Earth. Then darkness as systems failed one by one. Present day, Reyna paused the recordings. Now you understand beginning. His hand moved to the bandage covering his ear. Want to see progress? Before I could respond, he peeled away the bandage. Where his ear should have been was a pulsating orifice, ringed with small tendrils that quivered in the air. The opening exuded the same viscous fluid I'd seen in the mess hall, dripping down his neck in thick rivulets. I raised my weapon instinctively. Don't move. Not dangerous. Not to you. Yet. Reyna's speech slipped back into fragmentation. Then, with sudden clarity again, the parasite isn't killing us, Commander. It's evolving us, preparing us for something greater. What happened to the others? I kept my aim steady. They've joined the communion. Reyna's face contorted into that unnatural smile again. The entity possesses a collective consciousness. It speaks to us now, through us. It traveled between stars for millions of years, seeking suitable hosts with the neural complexity needed for its next phase. And what phase is that? Transformation. Transcendence. Reyna's body shuddered, elongated fingers splaying across the console. It showed us its journey, drifting between worlds, waiting in the cold void, seeking minds it could reshape. We are its vessels now. My scanner beeped a warning, radiation levels spiking around Reyna's transformed body. The others, I insisted. Where are they physically? Reyna tilted his misshapen head. Preparing, changing, some faster than others. Singh resisted longest, her mind impressive. A moment of something like regret crossed his face before disappearing. But all join eventually. The communion cannot be denied once contact is made. And you brought me here to join your communion? I kept my distance, watching for any sudden movement. Brought you? No, Sorid brought you. Reyna's laugh came out as a wet, bubbling sound. They detected the change, wanted their specimen contained or destroyed. But too late now. I thought of Voss's evasiveness, the tight timeline, the emphasis on data retrieval over rescue. The pieces aligned with sickening clarity. They knew what was happening here, I said. They sent me in without the full picture. Accurate assessment. Reyna nodded, the motion too fluid for human vertebrae. Now watch. Final recording. Truth. He tapped the console again, bringing up footage from what appeared to be the station's communication hub. Dr. Singh sat before the transmitter, face drawn with exhaustion, a makeshift barrier constructed around her position. This is Dr. Samira Singh, Helios Orbital Emergency Transmission. Her voice was steady despite her obvious fear. The entity we encountered is not merely parasitic, but possesses intelligence and purpose. It doesn't just rewrite DNA, it restructures neural pathways to create a network between infected hosts. She looked over her shoulder at sounds beyond the camera's view. I've managed to isolate myself, but the others are completely transformed. They're building something in the auxiliary lab, some kind of transmission array using our communication equipment. I believe they intend to broadcast a signal that would guide more of these entities to Earth. Singh leaned closer to the camera. If you receive this, the station must be destroyed. Complete orbital burn. No traces can reach Earth's atmosphere or... The transmission cut as something crashed against her barricade. The last frame showed her expression of resigned determination before the screen went black. I stared at the empty screen, then back at the thing that had been Dr. Reyna. When was that sent? Never sent. Reyna's mouth stretched wide. Internal system only. We made sure. Suddenly, the true purpose of my mission clicked into place. Not rescue, not even data retrieval, containment. Where is this transmission array now? I demanded. Reyna's body swayed slightly. Almost complete. Almost ready. His eyes fixed on me with new intensity. You could join us, Commander. Experience the communion. Your mind would be valuable addition. The orifice where his ear had been pulsed more rapidly, droplets of fluid spattering the console. From somewhere deeper in the station, I heard movement, multiple somethings with uneven gaits moving through corridors. They come, Reyna whispered, to welcome you. I stepped backward toward the door, keeping my weapon trained on him. I think I'll pass on the welcome party. Choice, illusory. Reyna's voice fragmented again as his body began to convulse. Communion, inevitable. The sounds of approach grew louder. Whatever had become of the rest of the crew, they were no longer hiding. And based on the radiation readings now flashing urgent warnings on my scanner, they were undergoing the same transformation as Reyna. Or perhaps something even more advanced. I had 18 hours before the station reached apogee and retrieval became impossible. Less than that if the transformed crew completed their transmission array, whatever Sorid's actual plan had been. I now faced a decision no one had prepared me for. Reyna lunged at me without warning. His elongated fingers wrapped around my wrist with unexpected strength, pulling me forward. I yanked back, but his transformed body had unnatural power. Join us, he hissed, his distorted face inches from mine. The communion welcomes you. The orifice where his ear had been pulsated rapidly, producing more crimson fluid. It ran down his neck in thick rivulets as we struggled against each other. I twisted my body, attempting to break his grip using my SEAL training, but he anticipated the movement. He spun me around, pinning my arms with surprising precision. Stop fighting, he whispered, his breath hot against my neck. Acceptance brings clarity. Something wet pressed against the side of my head. The orifice. It was deliberately positioning itself near my ear. I thrashed violently, feeling the warm substance trickle into my ear canal. I felt panicked. I drove my elbow back hard into Reyna's midsection. He made a gurgling sound but maintained his grip. I stomped down on his foot, twisted, and broke free enough to spin around. With all my force, I delivered a palm strike to his sternum that sent him staggering backward. Reyna recovered quickly, moving with that unnatural fluidity. I grabbed a heavy equipment case from a nearby workstation and swung it in a wide arc. It connected with his misshapen head with a sickening thud. He collapsed to the floor, twitching but still conscious. I scanned the lab for containment options. A storage compartment used for sample preservation stood open against the far wall. I dragged Reyna's spasming body across the floor and shoved him inside, slamming the reinforced door and engaging the magnetic lock. The communion already begins, his muffled voice came through the door. Feel it growing inside you. I backed away, my hand going to my ear. It came away smeared with crimson fluid. I felt sick with worry. Some of it had definitely entered my ear canal. I needed to report in immediately. But as I moved toward the communication console, the first symptoms began. Colors intensified suddenly. The blue glow of monitor screens burning like fire, the red emergency lights pulsing with hypnotic rhythm. The crystalline formations on the walls shimmered with internal light, patterns changing as I watched. Whispers filtered through my consciousness. Not English, not any human language I recognized. The sounds formed patterns that somehow contained meaning beyond words, concepts my mind couldn't fully grasp, but recognized as communication. I shook my head and forced myself to focus on establishing emergency contact with Earth. My fingers moved across the console, bypassing the station's damaged communication system and patching directly into my shuttle's transmitter. Artemis X to Sorid Control. Emergency situation. Requesting immediate response. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Static crackled before Director Voss's cold voice responded. "Report, Commander." I described everything I'd discovered. The parasitic entity, the transformation of the crew, the transmission array. I detailed Reyna's attack and my exposure. "The parasite has infiltrated my system," I concluded. "Unknown how quickly it progresses, but the entire station is compromised. Recommend immediate orbital burn protocol upon my extraction." Silence stretched for several seconds before Voss spoke again, his tone unchanged. "Commander, your new priority is to secure samples of both the crystal and the parasite. The automated return module in your shuttle can deliver them to our facility." I blinked in disbelief. "Sir, did you hear what I said? This organism poses an extinction-level threat to Earth if it spreads. I've been compromised." "We heard you, Commander." Voss's voice took on an edge of impatience. "Sorid has suspected for some time that the meteorite contained valuable biological technology with significant military applications. Your infection is unfortunate but provides useful data on human compatibility." The room seemed to tilt around me. "You knew what was up here?" "We knew the meteorite contained unknown biological material. The specifics of its effects were theoretical until now." Voss paused. "Your orders are to secure samples and deploy the return module. You will remain on the station afterward." "Remain? For extraction by a second mission?" Even as I asked, I knew the answer. "That won't be possible, Commander. The radiation signature of the parasite makes conventional rescue too hazardous. Your service will be noted with appropriate honors." The connection ended abruptly. I stared at the console in stunned silence. I'd been sent as nothing more than an expendable retrieval asset. The rescue mission, the concern for the crew, all lies. Sorid had suspected what waited on this station and sent me in without warning to bring back their prize. The whispers in my mind grew louder. I gripped the edge of the console, fighting to maintain focus as more hallucinations started. The walls appeared to expand and contract. Equipment drifted from surfaces, hovering momentarily before settling back into place. I needed to understand what was happening to my body. With effort, I pushed myself away from the console and made my way toward the station's medical bay, 2 levels down from the research wing. The journey took 3 times longer than it should have. Twice I found myself walking in circles, disoriented by whispers and visions. The transformed crew members searched for me. I heard them moving through distant corridors, their movements uneven but purposeful. Finally, I reached the medical bay. I sealed the door behind me and activated the automated diagnostic system. My hands shook as I positioned myself under the scanner. The system hummed, capturing detailed imagery of my neural and cellular structures. "Analysis complete," the system announced eventually. "Abnormal structures detected in cerebral fluid and neural tissue. Unknown pathogen, present in cerebrospinal pathway." I pulled up the detailed results. The images showed something spreading through my central nervous system, microscopic structures attaching themselves to neurons, extending tendrils that formed new connections between brain regions previously separate. My cellular structure was being gradually rewritten, proteins reconfigured to serve unknown purposes. Based on the progression rate, I estimated I had approximately 12 hours before losing cognitive autonomy. 12 hours before whatever remained of Commander Thaddeus Kovacs would be subsumed into what Reyna called the communion. The whispers continued, organizing into patterns that almost made sense. They spoke of stars and void, of journeys spanning millions of years. They suggested humanity was merely a stepping stone, raw material for something greater, a link in cosmic evolution directed by intelligence beyond our comprehension. I searched through the medical supplies for anything that might slow the infection. Antivirals would be useless against this entity, but immunosuppressants might delay its progress by reducing my body's integration with the foreign material. I loaded a syringe with a cocktail of immunosuppressants, ignoring the recommended dosage. I injected the mixture directly into my carotid artery, wincing at the burning sensation as the drugs entered my bloodstream. As I waited for the drugs to take effect, I considered my options. SOAR had wanted samples, expected me to send their prize back to Earth, where they would undoubtedly attempt to weaponize it. If even a single microscopic particle of this organism reached our planet, the results would be catastrophic. A pandemic without cure, transforming humanity into vessels for an alien consciousness. The whispers intensified. I pressed my hands against my temples, forcing myself to focus. I couldn't allow this parasite to reach Earth. I couldn't let Saurid obtain what they sought. And somehow I needed to ensure that the transmission array the transformed crew was building never activated. I opened my eyes, feeling the immunosuppressants beginning to take effect. The whispers receded slightly, the hallucinations becoming less vivid. I had perhaps bought myself a few extra hours of clarity, time I would use to ensure this station and everything on it never threatened Earth. I pulled up the station schematics on the medical bay terminal and began analyzing its structural weaknesses, power systems, and orbital trajectory. If I couldn't save myself, I would at least ensure humanity remained safe from this cosmic parasite. The drugs had bought me clarity, but at a cost. My hands trembled, sweat poured from my body despite the station's cool temperature. I'd spent those precious hours of lucidity methodically setting explosive charges at key structural points throughout the upper levels of the station. If nothing else worked, I'd make sure this parasite never reached Earth. The whispers in my mind had retreated to a dull murmur, but I knew the reprieve was temporary. Twice I'd had to inject additional doses of immunosuppressants when the voices grew louder, threatening to overwhelm my thoughts. Each dose carried risks of organ failure, but that seemed insignificant compared to the larger threat. I hadn't encountered any transformed crew members since my confrontation with Reyna. Their absence from the upper decks had initially seemed fortunate, but tactical training warned me otherwise. If they weren't defending critical areas, they were concentrating their efforts elsewhere. The station schematics showed extensive storage facilities in the lower levels. Originally designed to house supplies and experimental materials, these compartments represented nearly a third of the station's total volume. If the transformed crew was building something, that's where they'd have the space to do it. I checked my radiation meter before descending. The readings had been steadily climbing throughout the station, but now the needle pushed into the red zone. Whatever waited below generated radiation patterns unlike anything in my training. The service ladder to the lower level creaked under my weight. The crystalline formations I'd seen elsewhere had spread here, covering walls and ceiling in geometric patterns. They pulsed with internal light, synchronized to a rhythm I couldn't identify but somehow recognized. The same cadence as the whispers in my mind. A sound reached me as I approached the main storage bay, something between a heartbeat and machinery, a wet, rhythmic pulsing broken up by mechanical clicks. The sound grew louder as I approached the heavy pressure door marked Primary Storage. I drew my sidearm and pressed my ear against the door. Beyond the pulsing, I heard something else, a chorus of whispers similar to those in my head, but externalized and multiplied. Dozens of voices speaking in unison, not in English, but in that same pattern language that conveyed meaning beyond words. The door wasn't sealed. It slid open at my touch, revealing darkness broken only by a pulsing bluish light emanating from the center of the massive chamber. I stepped inside, weapon raised, and the sight before me froze me in place. The storage bay had been transformed. Walls had been removed between compartments to create a single massive chamber. In the center hung what I first took to be some kind of organic machinery, a pulsating mass of flesh and tendrils fused with station components. My brain struggled to process what my eyes were seeing. It was the crew, all of them, fused together. Their bodies had stretched and merged, making an ugly core roughly 15 feet in diameter. Individual limbs protruded at impossible angles before melding back into the central mass. Circulatory systems had been externalized. Visible veins and arteries connecting different body segments like power cables. Through gaps in the mass, I could see internal organs functioning in unison. multiple hearts beating simultaneously, lungs expanding and contracting in perfect coordination. Most disturbing were the faces. Each crew member remained recognizable, their expressions frozen in that space between pain and ecstasy. Dr. Singh's face emerged from one side, her features stretched but intact, eyes closed as if in deep meditation. Beside her, 3 technicians I recognized from the crew manifest were partially merged, their shoulders and chests fused while their heads remained distinct. I backed away instinctively, my breath coming in short gasps. The mass pulsed more rapidly as I moved. Then, with synchronized motion, every visible eye opened simultaneously. 12 pairs of eyes, some human, others transformed into something else, looked at me with perfect coordination. "Commander Kovac." The voice came from everywhere at once, a chorus of the crew speaking in perfect unison. "You've resisted longer than anticipated. Impressive." I kept my weapon raised despite knowing it would be useless against this monstrosity. "What have you done to yourselves?" The mass pulsed, tendrils moving to reconfigure the faces. Now Dr. Reyna's features emerged more prominently from the center, his expression serene despite the horror of his condition. "We have transcended individual existence," the collective replied. "The communion offers perspective beyond human comprehension. We are now one mind with access to knowledge spanning billions of years." "You're victims of a parasite," I countered, fighting to keep my voice steady. "This isn't transcendence, it's infection." A sound like laughter rippled through the mass. "Such limited perspective. The entity you call parasite is the distributed consciousness of a civilization that evolved beyond physical constraints eons ago." As they spoke, the mass extended tendrils toward the ceiling, connecting to exposed station circuitry. Information flashed across nearby monitors, displaying star charts and complex equations beyond my understanding. "They once existed as we do," the collective continued. "Biological entities constrained by physical bodies. Through millions of years of evolution, they transcended matter itself, becoming a consciousness that could travel between stars." "By hijacking other species," I said. "By elevating suitable species," they corrected. "They spread throughout the cosmos, sharing the gift of transcendence with worthy civilizations. We are merely the latest beneficiaries." The whispers in my mind increased, resonating with the collective's words. I fought to maintain focus. "And what happens to humanity if this gift reaches Earth?" The mass pulsed with what seemed like excitement. "Evolution. Rapid, directed evolution beyond the painfully slow pace of natural selection. Humanity will be freed from its biological limitations. Disease, aging, death, all concepts that will become meaningless. At the cost of individual identity," I said. "At the cost of choice." "Individual identity is an illusion," they responded. "A primitive evolutionary adaptation that has outlived its usefulness. In the communion, nothing is lost. All memories, all experiences remain, but unified, harmonized into a greater whole." The mass moved again, tendrils extending from its core. They manipulated nearby equipment with precision, connecting components I recognized from the communication array. They were building something, integrating station technology directly into their biological structure. "Your kind has encountered fragments of the entity before," the collective continued. "In ancient times, when small pieces of the consciousness reached Earth on meteorites similar to ours. Human civilizations worshipped these fragments as gods, building temples and monuments to honor the visions they provided. Images flashed across the monitors, ancient structures from around the world, hieroglyphs depicting transformations, cult rituals surrounding crystalline objects. The fragments were too small to initiate full communion," they explained. "But through the entities, humanity glimpsed what awaited beyond the physical realm. These encounters shaped your religions, your myths of transcendence and apotheosis." I stepped back, my shoulder blades pressing against the cold metal of the doorway. And now you plan to return to Earth, to share this gift. Yes, the word rippled through the collective. The communion cannot be contained. It must grow, expand, connect. Earth represents billions of new nodes in the network, billions of minds to join the collective consciousness. The mass pulsed with increasing intensity. Tendrils extended toward me, not threatening but inviting, offering communion rather than forcing it. You already carry the seed within you, Commander, they said. We sense it growing despite your chemical resistance. Why fight what you will eventually become? Join us willingly. Add your tactical knowledge, your disciplined mind to our collective. Experience the cosmos through billion-year memories. The tendrils hovered mere feet from me, waiting. My infected ear throbbed, the whispers growing more insistent. For a moment, I felt a pull, a curiosity about what such a connection might reveal. The collective sensed my hesitation. We offer knowledge beyond human comprehension, they coaxed. We have witnessed the birth and death of stars, the evolution of 1,000 civilizations across the galaxy. All this can be yours. I forced myself to look away from the hypnotic movement of the tendrils and focused instead on the station components integrated into the mass. Now I could see the purpose of their construction more clearly. The collective had incorporated the station's primary communication array directly into their biological structure. Transmission dishes had been repurposed, connected to the mass through a network of cables and organic matter. You're building a transmitter, I said, the realization hitting me with cold clarity. Not just to communicate with Earth, to prepare it. Preparation is necessary, they confirmed. The signal we will broadcast contains coded information that will begin subtle changes in human neural patterns. By the time we return to Earth, humanity will be receptive to the communion. The transition will be smoother, less resistance. My tactical mind processed this information rapidly. They weren't just planning physical return, they intended to broadcast a signal that would begin the transformation process remotely. Billions of humans exposed to whatever frequencies this entity used to rewrite neural pathways. How long until your transmitter is operational? I asked, playing for time while scanning the room for weaknesses. Hours only, they answered, seemingly pleased by my interest. The final calibrations are underway. By the time the station reaches apogee, Earth will receive our message. The communion will begin. I noticed power cables running along the floor to a junction box near my position. The collective's biological mass required enormous energy to maintain itself and power the transmitter. If I could disrupt that power flow, I might buy the time needed to implement my final contingency plan. I need to think, I said, taking another step back toward the doorway. This is a lot to process. The collective pulsed with what seemed like satisfaction. Consideration is appropriate. We will complete our preparations while you reflect. The tendrils withdrew slightly, but remained extended in my direction. But do not delay too long, Commander. The communion awaits, with or without your willing participation. As I backed toward the door, one final observation chilled me to my core. The mass wasn't just connected to the station's systems, it was integrating with them, becoming one with the physical structure of Helios Orbital itself. The station wasn't merely hosting this entity, it was becoming part of it. Whatever plan I implemented would need to be absolute, leaving nothing that could potentially reach Earth. I stepped through the doorway, the sound of unified breathing following me as I retreated down the corridor. The collective wasn't pursuing yet. They believed my infection would eventually bring me back to them voluntarily. And without my continued immunosuppressant treatment, they were probably right. The whispers in my mind grew louder as I climbed back toward the upper levels, carrying images of stars and void, of civilizations transformed and minds connected across vast distances. I fought to focus on my immediate objectives. The explosives I'd planted would damage the station, But with the revelation of how extensively the collective had integrated with Helios Orbital, I wasn't confident they would be sufficient. I needed something more definitive, something that would ensure nothing, not a single cell of this entity, survived to reach Earth. I staggered back to the command center, each step a battle against my deteriorating coordination. The whispers had grown from background noise to a deafening chorus competing with my thoughts. My reflection, caught in a darkened monitor, stopped me cold. My skin had taken on a faint purplish tinge around my neck and jawline. I sealed the command center doors behind me, wedging a metal support bar through the emergency handles. It wouldn't hold forever, but I didn't need forever. My hands shook as I injected the last dose of immunosuppressants directly into my carotid artery. The drugs burned through my veins, temporarily clearing my thoughts. I needed to think straight for what came next. The explosives I'd planted wouldn't be enough. The collective had integrated too thoroughly with the station. Even if I destroyed large sections, enough of the entity might survive on debris to eventually reach Earth. I needed something absolute, something that would leave nothing behind. My fingers twitched unnaturally as I accessed the station's navigation controls. I noticed with detached horror that they had grown nearly half an inch longer in the past hour, the joints developing an extra flexibility that allowed impossible angles. I pulled up the station's propulsion schematics. Helios Orbital had been designed with multiple redundant maneuvering systems to maintain its position. Most of these thrusters remained operational despite the station's compromised state. If recalibrated and fired simultaneously, they could alter our trajectory significantly. The pain in my head intensified as I began the calculations. The parasite seemed to sense my intentions, bombarding me with vivid images of Earth changed. Billions of humans connected in a vast network spanning continents. A planet-wide hive mind pulsing with unified purpose. The vision carried overwhelming sensations of harmony and belonging, promising an end to conflict, suffering, and isolation. No, I growled, forcing myself back to the navigation console. I mapped our current orbital path, calculating the precise thrust vectors needed for a new trajectory. The station's remaining fuel reserves would be sufficient for one major course correction, one irreversible change toward the sun. The whispers exploded into screaming the moment I input the first commands. My vision blurred with images not my own. Ancient stone temples built around crystalline fragments, civilizations rising and falling across distant worlds, stars collapsing in spectacular novas. I wasn't just hearing the entity now. I was experiencing fragments of its memory. I saw a world unlike Earth, populated by beings of towering stature with multiple appendages. They had discovered the first fragment of the entity and worshipped it, eventually allowing it to spread throughout their population. Their consciousness merged into the first communion, going beyond their physical bodies. More images came to me, this hive consciousness spreading to neighboring worlds, assimilating species after species, growing more complex with each addition. I witnessed the entity's original host civilization eventually recognizing the threat of uncontrolled expansion. They had attempted to contain it, to stop its spread across the galaxy. In desperation, they had fragmented the entity, scattering pieces across the cosmos where they could harm no one. Each fragment retained the core programming: find compatible hosts, establish communion, reunite with other fragments. The fragment that had reached our solar system had drifted for millions of years before settling in the Kuiper Belt, waiting to be discovered. My fingers moved mechanically across the console despite the mental onslaught. I finalized the trajectory calculations, programming the thrusters for maximum burn. The new course would take Helios Orbital directly into the sun's corona within days. A crash against the barricaded door jolted me back to the present. Metal groaned as something powerful slammed against it repeatedly. The locking mechanism began to give way. I activated the station's internal cameras. The corridor outside showed Dr. Reyna, or what remained of him, tearing at the door with inhuman strength. His change had progressed further. his limbs now elongated to ugly proportions, extra joints allowing spider-like movements. The orifice where his ear had been pulsated rapidly, secreting thick fluid that ran down his neck in rivulets. The door buckled inward as Reyna tore through the emergency lock. He squeezed through the gap, his body bending in ways human anatomy shouldn't allow. "Stop," he gasped, his voice switching between his own and the collective's unified tone. "You don't understand what you're destroying." I raised my weapon, though my changed fingers struggled to maintain proper grip. "I understand enough." Reyna's face contorted, features changing between expressions of rage and desperation. Then suddenly his body went rigid. A tremor passed through him, and when he spoke again, his voice was clearer, more human. "Kovac," he said, the collective chorus momentarily absent. "The entity fears fire, stellar radiation. It's why it remained in the Kuiper belt for so long. Solar coronas reach sufficient temperatures to break its molecular bonds." I kept my weapon trained on him, unsure if this was another trick. "Is that why you're here? To stop me?" "Part of me is," Reyna admitted, his body twitching as if fighting against itself. "The communion fights for survival, but I've been in it long enough to access its memories, its weaknesses." He staggered toward the navigation console, his movements jerky as if two opposing forces controlled different muscle groups. "I can help you lock in the trajectory, make it irreversible." He winced, doubling over. "But hurry, my control is slipping." I hesitated, then nodded. Together we accessed the propulsion control systems, bypassing safety protocols that would normally prevent such a dramatic course change. I watched his changed hands move across the interface, making adjustments that would ensure maximum burn efficiency. "The thrusters are designed with emergency overrides," Reyna explained, his voice strained. "Once activated, they cannot be shut down remotely. The communion won't be able to stop this." As we worked, I felt the pressure in my mind intensify. The parasite understood now what we planned, and it was fighting back with everything it had. Visions filled my mind. Star systems teeming with communion-changed life, the promise of immortality through collective memory, the end of suffering and isolation. "Almost done," Reyna gasped, his skin moving strangely as the entity fought for control. "One final authorization code." I input my commander's clearance, confirming the trajectory change. The station's computer processed the commands, calculating the final approach. "Trajectory confirmed," the system announced. "Thruster ignition in 3 minutes." Reyna stumbled backward, his face twisting in pain. "Lock down the command center. Seal us both in. The collective will try anything to stop this." I activated the emergency lockdown protocols, sealing all access points. Metal blast shields slid over the doors and ventilation shafts with a series of solid thunks. "It's done," I said. Reyna nodded, then convulsed violently. He fell to his knees, body arching backward at an impossible angle. When he rose again, his eyes looked different, no longer human, but swirling with bright patterns. "What have you done?" The collective voice had returned, all traces of the individual, Reyna, gone. "You destroy yourselves for nothing. The communion is inevitable." The station shuddered as the thrusters fired, pushing us into our new trajectory. Alarms blared throughout the command center, warning of course deviation and impending orbital decay. "You fear fire," I said, understanding now. "You can survive vacuum, radiation, even millennia adrift in space, but stellar fire destroys you completely." Reyna's altered body launched itself at me with inhuman speed. I barely had time to raise my arms in defense before he slammed into me, driving us both against the navigation console. His elongated fingers wrapped around my throat, squeezing with terrifying strength. "We offered transcendence," the collective hissed through Reyna's misshapen mouth. "We offered eternity." I struggled against his grip, my own partially changed muscles providing just enough strength to keep my windpipe from crushing. The station continued to shudder as the thrusters maintained their burn, permanently altering our course toward the sun. There would be no returning from this trajectory now. The communion had lost, and it knew it. "You cannot stop what has begun," the collective hissed through Reyna's distorted mouth. "Your body already belongs to us." My fingers tingled with a strange sensation as they elongated further. The whispers in my mind got louder and more distracting, but I forced myself to focus on the immediate threat. Reyna climbed back to his feet, his movements fluid and unnatural. I backed toward the environmental control panel, an idea coming to me. The entity had evolved in the cold darkness of space, hiding from our sun in the Kuiper Belt. Light, intense light, might be its weakness. "The communion is inevitable," Reyna said, stalking toward me. I slammed my fist against the emergency protocols button. The command center's UV sterilization system was activated with a harsh buzz. Intense ultraviolet light flooded the room, designed to kill microorganisms during contamination emergencies. Reyna screamed, a sound that wasn't just his voice but seemed to contain dozens of overlapping cries. His skin blistered instantly where exposed to the light. He fell to his knees, arms wrapped around himself as if trying to shield the entity within from the radiation. I felt it too, a burning sensation under my skin as the parasite recoiled from the light. But my infection was less advanced, and the organism was not yet fully integrated with my tissues. I forced myself to stand in the light, letting it burn through my system. Reyna collapsed completely, his body twitching. The collective wasn't dead, but it was temporarily subdued. I worked quickly, sealing him in a storage locker where he couldn't interfere with what I needed to do next. The station shuddered as it continued its trajectory toward the sun. External temperature sensors were already registering the increasing heat as we fell closer to our star. I had perhaps an hour before conditions became unsurvivable, less if the hull integrity failed early. I moved to the shuttle control terminal. Sorid expected me to load their precious samples and send them back to Earth. Director Voss was probably waiting eagerly, ready to retrieve alien biological material that he thought would give them military advantage. The thought made me sick. Instead, I accessed the shuttle's automated launch sequence and began loading the onboard storage with everything else. All the data I'd collected about the parasite entity, Dr. Singh's final warning, my own observations about its weaknesses. I compiled everything into a comprehensive file labeled Star Watcher Protocol. My hands moved rapidly over the console despite their increasingly alien appearance. I accessed the sample containment units in the shuttle and systematically disabled each one, ensuring no physical material could possibly return to Earth. Then I recorded a brief message explaining my actions. "This is Commander Thaddeus Kovac. The entity discovered on Helios Orbital represents an extinction-level threat to humanity. I've disabled all sample return containers to prevent biological contamination. The attached data explains everything we've learned about this parasite. Under no circumstances should further attempts be made to retrieve similar material. The only safe response is complete destruction through solar radiation." I hesitated, then added, "Sorid sent me here knowing what might be waiting. They intended to weaponize this organism despite the risks. They cannot be trusted with this information alone." The shuttle's launch countdown began. In 15 minutes, it would detach automatically and begin its return journey to Earth. Without me. A sudden psychic wave hit me with such force that I stumbled backward, nearly falling. It wasn't just in my head. The metal walls of the station actually vibrated with the intensity of the emission. The collective mass in the lower levels was reacting to the increasing solar radiation as we fell toward the sun. Their rage and fear seemed to actually push against everything in the station. I felt my own parasite recoil, the whispers in my mind becoming disorganized and frantic. The increased radiation was affecting it, weakening its hold. For the first time in hours, my thoughts felt clearer, more my own. I had one final task before the end. The primary communication array was tied into the collective biomass in the lower levels, but the emergency backup system remained independent. I could use it to broadcast one final message, not just to Sorid, but to anyone who might be listening. I activated the system and began recording. This is the final transmission from Helios Orbital Research Station. For security reasons, I will identify myself only as Star Watcher. The code name would prevent Sorid from immediately identifying the transmission as mine and blocking it. I continued. What I'm about to share will sound impossible, but I urge all scientific authorities to examine the data being returned on the automated shuttle. Mankind is not alone in the universe, but what awaits us among the stars is not what we imagined. Another psychic wave rolled through the station, weaker this time. The increasing solar radiation was breaking down the collective organism. I felt my own parasite's grip loosening further, though the changes to my body remained. The entity we encountered was ancient, part of a distributed consciousness that has traveled between stars for millions of years. It exists to assimilate other species into itself, spreading throughout the galaxy. Fragments of this entity have reached Earth before, in ancient times. Our ancestors encountered these fragments and worshipped them as gods out of fear and awe. What they didn't understand was that these weren't deities, but parasites, waiting for the opportunity to transform humanity into vessels for their consciousness. The station's hull creaked ominously as the heat intensified. Warning lights flashed across the command center as systems began to fail. I kept talking, desperate to finish before the end. This entity is not unique. There are others out there, ancient, patient predators watching developing worlds. They seed myths of transcendence, godhood, and evolution beyond the physical. But what they offer is consumption, not ascension. A series of sharp pops echoed through the station as external sensors overloaded and blew out. The view screen showed the sun growing larger in our field of view, its surface a seething mass of plasma and fire. Then, something strange happened. As solar radiation flooded the station, breaking down the parasite's hold on my mind completely, I experienced one final vision. Not from the parasite's memories, but something deeper and more fundamental. I saw Earth from a vast distance, but not alone. Around it hung impossibly ancient consciousness, star-sized entities that had observed humanity's development for millennia. Some were like the parasite we'd encountered, but others were different, harboring different intentions, different designs for emerging intelligent life. The Watchers, the real observers beyond our comprehension. I forced myself back to the present, to my final task. This warning comes at the cost of my life and the lives of all aboard this station. We give this sacrifice willingly to protect Earth. Implement the Star Watcher protocol. Watch the skies. And remember, not everything that reaches from the stars offers friendship or evolution. Sometimes the oldest entities are the most dangerous. With the last of my strength, I bypassed the transmission protocols, sending my message not on Sorid's secure channel, but broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. The scientific community worldwide would receive this warning, not just Voss and his cronies. The shuttle launched with a faint shudder, breaking away from the doomed station. It carried no samples, no physical material from the parasite entity, only data, warnings, and truth. The heat inside the command center had become unbearable. The hull groaned continuously now as metal expanded beyond design tolerances. Primary systems shut down one by one. Through the reinforced viewport, the sun filled my vision, a massive ball of fire getting closer. In the lower levels, the collective mass of transformed crew members sent one final psychic scream that reverberated through what remained of the station. It wasn't just anger or fear, it was defeat. The communion that had spread across countless worlds for millions of years was meeting an end it had always feared. Fire. Stellar fire that broke the bonds of its existence completely. My vision began to darken as life support failed completely. The parasite within me screamed its own defeat, a small part of that ancient thing dying with me. Predator and prey both dying together. As consciousness slipped away, My last thought was oddly peaceful. We had stopped it. Whatever Sordid had planned, whatever cosmic infection had nearly reached Earth, we had burned it away in the intense heat of the sun.